Hey guys, Nathan Duck River Honey. This is number 9 in my vlog on building a bee business. It's been a busy week this week. I've done a lot of woodenware this week. We've had a lot of rainy days, so I got caught up on book work. Taxes are done. I had a grant that I received last fall that I'm finishing up now, and getting ready to turn the paperwork in on that. And with rain, it's also a good week for woodenware. So I've made progress on divided nuke boxes. I've got, I don't know, like 22 or 25 divided medium nuke boxes made up to make queens. And got that figured out. I think it's going to work pretty good. I'll show you that in detail here in just a minute. I did have a couple good weather days. It's been crazy weather. We went from 84 degrees to 82 degrees to a high of 54 today with rain. It's just been nuts. It's hard to get used to one thing or another, you know. So a couple days ago, I did have a good weather day. I got through the rest of my colonies. I did some on Sunday, and then some on Tuesday, and man, I'd say everybody's pretty much on track. I've got some that I think I'm going to have to pull back again. I'm going to have to split them or pull brood away from them. They've got a lot of brood going on, a lot of population. I think they're going to try to swarm before we get to the nectar flow, which we've been in a dearth. I made some small nukes up and actually had a little bit of robbing on Sunday. But we have hit some kind of a little nectar flow, because I went through some colonies on Tuesday and they had white wax going on. They were storing fresh nectar in the upper boxes, and I tasted some of it. I didn't recognize it. It was fair to good. It wasn't great by any means. Sort of it almost looked like sourwood color. It was hazy and sort of light brown, you know, not clear at all. So I don't know what that source is. We've got a lot of dogwood blooming right now. It could be that. Hazel is blooming. I don't know what that could be. I didn't recognize the flavor on it. I also went through and graded my hives out. Most of my production colonies are into 4 mediums. I've got one that's in 5 mediums, and they're strong and looking good. They're going to make a honey crop, no doubt. You know, they're on pace for that. I've got a few hives that are into 3 mediums still, and some of those look like they're going to progress enough. You know, they're loaded with brood. They look like they're going to progress enough to get into the honey crop range of population. Some of them are just not doing that well. They, you know, they probably got an old queen or a poor quality queen or something going on that they're just not progressing to the point that they're going to make honey. So my plans with them is to do one of 2 things. I'm coming back from Corey Stevens' place in Missouri on April 15th or 16th, and I'm bringing 25 virgins with me, so I need to make 25 more splits out of my 40 production colonies. So that's going to cull them back pretty hard. It's going to absorb some excess brood. But if I don't have enough excess brood, like 1 and 2 frames out of each big colony, then those 3-box hives that are not progressing, I'm just going to bust them down completely. Find the queen in there, kill her, and bust them up completely and re-queen with one of these virgins. it's kind of tricky to do that, to replace a mated queen with a virgin. So there's some things I can do to make that better, and I'm probably going to start doing that on some of these. So setting up this next group of splits, I'm at April 6th right now. Sometime around April 10th, depending on weather, I'm planning to go through my colonies and find excess brood, and I'm going to get it up above an excluder on the top of the hive. Set an extra box up and put it up on top of the hive. I did a video on this before. The difference is this time I'm going to wait 7 days before I actually pull those and make splits. And the reason I want to wait 7 days is because two things are going to happen. You can take that brood up high enough, and I'm actually going to target middle-aged to young sealed brood for this, like tan-colored brood versus, you know, old, dark, leathery looking cappings. So young to middle-aged, because they're going to age a week in the hive, and then, you know, I want them to emerge after that. So when I move them up above an excluder, if they're far enough away from the brood nest that they're not getting enough queen pheromone, they can start queen cells just because they think they're queenless. They're so far removed from the queen down below. So if you wait 7 days, all those emergency cells in there will be capped, and they'll be big and they're easy to find. And if you knock those down, when I go to harvest those splits off, they are hopelessly queenless at that point. They don't have any eggs or young larvae that will allow them to make an emergency queen. So when I pull that brood off and go through it one time looking for emergency cells, knock those down, and then I can just introduce my caged virgin queen and just do a straight candy release. 2 to 3 days later, she emerges. They will almost certainly accept that virgin queen because they have no option at that point. So the hives that I'm going to cull out, there's a couple things I can do with those. I'm going to requeen a mated queen with a virgin queen, which is a tough thing to do. The bees don't want to accept a virgin, especially a virgin that's not related to them, when they have the ability to raise emergency queens that are going to be, you know, more closely related to them. So there's a couple of things that I can do. I can go in, you know, 6-7 days before, find that queen killer, close the hive up, go back in 6-7 days and find all of the emergency cells in there and knock them down, and then, you know, bust that hive up and make splits with it. And I know that there's not any more brood in there that they can make emergency cells with. So that's one way of doing it. If I don't want the queen, that's probably what I'll do. If I do want to keep the queen and start a nuke with her, then I can use this contraption. This is a queen isolation cage. I think it's made in Europe if I remember right. And Better Bee is selling this. So you can put a frame of empty comb in here. And this is for a medium. They make them for deeps as well. And put it down in a box. You have to remove one frame from a 10-frame box, so 9 frames, and this will fit. And the queen can't get out of here. Other bees can go through the queen excluder material, but the queen cannot get out. So that basically keeps your hive queen right until you want to pull her out, and you know where all of the eggs are, and you can time it so there's no larvae or young eggs anywhere else in the hive. So that's a pretty useful thing. I picked these up originally for queen rearing. You know, Bob Benny and Chris Werner use a timing box to isolate the queen so that they have larvae of a very specific age, and they know exactly where to look for it in the timing box to graft from. So they're isolating their queen mothers, but they're using a box with queen excluder material in dados that slide in. Well, this seemed like an easy solution to me because I don't have to have a special box or anything. I can just stick that thing in there and put a frame in it and put the queen in there with it and shake a bees and you're good to go. So I think that's a multi-purpose thing. A lot of things I can use that for. All right, so I'll let you take a look at my divided nuke boxes. So I use double screen boards a lot in my operation. I'm an all medium beekeeper, so I've just got one footprint, a 10 frame footprint. And that means I can use a double screen as a nuke bottom board. I can use it to overwinter a small colony. I can use it to split a colony that swarmed. Just tons of things I can use this for. And since I've got a bunch of these anyway, I thought, man, why don't I fix my double screens up so that I can use them as a two-way mating nuke. So all I did is I cut a rear entrance. This is about 2.5 by 3/8. So it's got an entrance here and an entrance here. The reason that I made this roughly 2.5 by 3/8 is I can take door shims and pretty much just close that off when I don't want it to be used. And I can even just take a stapler and staple those in, and the bees won't use this rear entrance. They'll propolize that shut. And then when I do want to use it, those come off real easy. I can also use these as a little bit of a landing board, and I can pinch this entrance down to about 1.25 by 3/8. Same with the front. So if you've got real small nukes in robbing season, these can be pretty handy and just work good. Work really well like that. So I also took a router and a 1/2 inch bit and routed a notch about 3/8 of an inch in on either side. And on the boxes, I took a 1/4 inch dado and put a groove or a dado right in the center of the box. That actually did cut through the handle. I knew that it was going to. So what I did is I just stapled and glued a cleat on the outside of the box, and that covers the handle. And I think that's going to work pretty good. And then I've got some masonite hardboard. You can get that at Lowe's. I got a couple of damaged sheets, so they're normally $14. They gave them to me for $7. That slides down in the groove. And now I've got a divided nuke box. I may have to go with a 9 frame arrangement at some point. I think that these frames will get pretty tight. They'll get tight working these in here. So it may be better to do 4 frames on one side and 5 on the other. But I'm going to try this first and see how it works. Now this system is just almost a straight copy of Chris Werner's, except he's in deep equipment and he splits them into thirds. So, but the rest of it is very similar to what he's doing, just adapted for my uses and my equipment. And Chris Werner does use this fiberglass window screen to cover the top of the hive, because you need something to keep the bees from coming up. You know, if you get a little bit of warp in the lid, you don't want the queens to be able to cross over. So putting that window screen on there before you put a migratory top on, make sure that the queen can't cross over. What this screen also allows you to do is to work half the colony at a time without the bees fussing with each other. Once that gets propolized down, it'll get easier to work with. It also allows you to smoke the bees down some through the screen so they can't fly up when you open the cover. And I suspect that if you drill holes in the lid and use a bucket feeder or a jar feeder, that the syrup would go through this mesh and you wouldn't have to cut a hole in the mesh. So you could have a jar feeder on each side here and feed each side of the colony through this screen. So I think this system's going to work pretty well. You know, I try to learn things from people who know more than I do, and Chris Werner knows a whole lot more about raising queens than I do. So it seemed like a really good system. It made sense, and I could adapt it for my stuff, and so that's sort of what I've done. I've got, like I said, 20 or 25 of these made, so that'll allow me to mate 40 or 50 queens at a time. I may make some more. We'll see. We'll see how these work and whether I need to tweak them or not. I'd like to say thanks to David Ball. I believe I met David at Hive Life this year, and he made a donation to the channel through my website, so I appreciate that. It really does help to keep the lights on. Question and answer this week. I had a lot of questions on my video I did about the storm knocking my hives over, and the word ratchet straps was used I don't know, 100 times in the comments section on that video. Just so you know, I do know what ratchet straps are, and I do have a lot of ratchet straps. The reason that I don't use ratchet straps on my hives is I've got, if you count the nukes, I've got like 65 hives right now, and I'm trying to go to 150. I can't ratchet strap every hive down, especially if I try to go to 250 or 300. Just can't do it. It's going to add more cost, more labor, more depreciation on those things, and it's just not a tenable solution. So I don't think it's necessary. I think I've got a pretty good idea on why my hives tipped. The blocks that I had them sitting on, I didn't dig down underneath them, and I think that westernmost hive probably had a little bit of tip in the block, which is fine. You know, it's fine most of the time. It will sink down over time as the grass underneath it dies and rots, and you know, just stuff sinks as it sits there for years, and it's not going to be a problem. But when you're in the spring of the year, I'm popping those boxes open all the time, and the hives have just been through winter and they're going through spring buildup. They have eaten so much food that the hive is at its lightest point of the year, and the boxes are less glued together than they are at any other point of the year. And then you take a hive that's got a little bit of tip to it. You take I don't know what the straight line wind was. I didn't see the high wind measurements, but I've got a 100-year-old smokehouse that had an intact roof, and it tore half the roof off. So that's a big win to do that. You know, that smokehouse has survived a lot of weather, and it came straight from the west, which is a little odd. So in my mind, that's a small risk of that happening again. You know, it's the first time I've ever had hives tipped. So what I did is I fixed the foundation on that hive, and I set T-posts inside of it, so if I ever do get a straight wind from the west or the east on that row again, if it knocks one hive over, it'll deflect off that metal post and it won't knock the rest of them over. So I think that manages the risk pretty well without adding a ton of labor and ratchet straps and hassle in trying to strap down every hive. I don't live in Kansas or Nebraska where there are thousands of windmills for a reason. We don't get 60 to 70 mile an hour winds that often. We don't get 90 mile an hour winds that often. And I have had 90 mile an hour winds over the last few years and had hives survive that. So I just think the risk of it happening again is pretty low, and yeah, so that's why I'm not going to ratchet strap my hives down. I just don't think that's a tenable solution. There's other things I could do that would be better, like going to two-way pallets would probably solve that problem as well. Spreading my hives out more would solve that problem as well. It's not going to knock down. You know, I'm not going to get a domino effect if the hives can't fall into another hive. So there's some other things I'd rather do that are structural than add a bunch of labor that I don't think is necessary. So channel news. I've got a video I'm working on that sort of shocked me. I'm actually testing joints and fasteners on boxes. I've heard for years about you know, a box joint or a finger joint is stronger than a rabbit joint, and which fasteners are going to be the strongest. So I actually did a test on this. I broke, I don't know how many dollars worth of boxes I've broken so far, but it's starting to add up at this point. But I found something that really surprised me. And I mean, it could be significant. Really could be significant. So I'm going to do some more testing on this. I made up some more samples. I'm going to break them and just see what in the world happens. But that video will probably post, I don't know, Saturday or Sunday. Our weather's junk today, and I really don't want to get out in it and do this test, but as long as it's not raining, I may go ahead and get it done. And if I do that today, I'll probably post this video on Saturday. It's going to be interesting. Really, at least it is to me. It's super interesting what I've stumbled into here. It could be significant. It really could. There's a lot of stuff that could come of this. Guys, as always, I try to answer a question or two a week. So if you've got a question, let me know, and I'll pick one or two that I think are interesting and try to get them answered. Appreciate you watching. I'll see you on the next one.